This is the former Bruckmann Brewing Company. This historic brewing complex is the most complete in Cincinnati. It's probably the most complete in the region and could even be the most complete in the country, and yet so many people don't know that it's here. So many people don't know that tucked right underground in these beautiful lagering tunnels, there's artifacts that tell the stories of each individual building in this complex, how they got here, and why they're still standing. This isn't just another story about another Cincinnati brewery. This is about a space that, for all intents and purposes, shouldn't still exist. It's about the people that are hoping to save it for generations to come.
I can go down there.
Well, I think we're carrying it.
Okay.
Is the way, yeah. And we can take it straight in. So you gotta, I guess, get on the other side of that, huh? So maybe it makes sense to either brace it up, like here, all right, we can hold it, you just set it down while you climb over it, and then we can get it over to you. So you don't have to deal with climbing over that crap while you're holding a kayak.
Seems reasonable.
Nice.
This is tied, I think. Is there supposed to be plugs in these holes here?
Oh yeah, the oar is up top. Let me go grab that.
Oh yeah, I forgot to ask. Did you get your tetanus shots updated?
Yeah.
Got it.
Awesome.
That's awesome. All right, well, we'll see you next time.
Yeah.
So the Brewing Heritage Trail didn't set out to have the first person, as far as we know, kayak in an underground lagering cellar, but nevertheless, that's how it seemed to have worked out. The Brewing Heritage Trail is a nonprofit organization based here in Cincinnati. It's been around since 2005, and our mission is to preserve, share, and celebrate Cincinnati's brewing heritage, both past and present. We do that in a variety of different ways. One of them is by leading tours, public tours around the Cincinnati region. We do about 300 to 400 each year. We take about 4,000 people a year on our tours. We also accomplish our mission through the construction of the Brewing Heritage Trail itself. It's a physical trail that takes you through parts of Cincinnati's Over the Rhine neighborhood. It's got signage about the Cincinnati's brewing past, and also we've got art installations, things like that. A digital app that goes along to it so you can take your own self-guided tours, which is free. And we celebrate Cincinnati's brewing heritage also through the Bachfest celebration each year in Over the Rhine, which is the neighborhood's beer festival. It takes place each March. And another big project that we're working on too is the development of a national brewing museum here in Cincinnati called the American Museum of Brewing.
The bigger goal of this project, of the Brewing Heritage Trail, and all of the volunteers who are out here working on it is to get this space open for tours. That means they have to find a way into the space that is conducive to tours. There are two different ways to get into this space. The first, and the driest, involves squeezing through a tiny hole under some stairs, which then leads to a hidden staircase. 3/4 of a hidden staircase, because once you get down to the bottom, you must then trust your life to a series of buckets and large metal chunks before your feet finally hit solid ground below. Not very conducive to tours.
Man, you guys are putting a lot of trust in that.
The second involves a very terrifying shed that, as you can see, needs a new roof, which leads to a set of stairs that are a little bit rusty with some holes in them, no big deal, and at the bottom, about 3 feet of water. That's workable. It also gives the team a list of things that really need to get done. A new roof on the terrace shed, new stairs, and of course, somebody's got to get rid of this water. Piece of cake.
What happened here and what differentiates Cincinnati's pre-prohibition and post-prohibition beer scenes is that companies, most notably Anheuser-Busch, spent prohibition busy really just figuring out how to stay in business and to keep their plants and things operating. They weren't making beer there, but they were making other stuff. So their facilities never went dormant. They didn't sell everything off. And they were setting themselves up for that day when beer was going to become legal again. So they were set up to really take off. We had breweries here that thought they could do the same thing, but most of them were completely wrong, because that period between the beginning and the end of Prohibition, when you think about all the innovations that happened in the world in the 1920s, the brewing industry was definitely not exempt from that. The way people made beer globally changed radically in that period of time. So post-Prohibition, all the modern equipment made a beer that was what people thought beer should taste like. And that had to do in large part with the way taste changed during Prohibition. We only had one company in Cincinnati that could really hit the ground running, and that was Bruckmann. They have continued to update their equipment. So by the time 3-2 beer is legalized, Bruckmann is immediately ready to start making it, and they do, and they're overwhelmed. And Bruckmann is one of those companies, you go back and you look at Anheuser-Busch, they set themselves up to just rock it the minute that Prohibition was over. And they did, and they grew to what they are today. Bruckmann had that opportunity. And I think when you go back and look at the history of what they did and didn't do, they were just far too conservative. Where if Bruckmann had gone out and borrowed a bunch of money and invested in infrastructure and been 3 or 4 times their size, or ready to really amp up their size and production, they'd probably still be around today, and they might be one of the 3 or 4 largest breweries in the country. But they played it safe, and it means they did killer business. But by the time they decided that they ought to invest in significant expansion, they had a lot of other competition. So Cincinnati breweries, they tried to come back, and a lot of them did, but it was a different world, and the beer was different, and it was a lot more the same, and we really got into the yellow beer era.
Now the rubber hits the road and the real work starts. Volunteers can start digging into the actual project. It's about brush removal, it's about junk removal, and maybe most importantly, it's about getting the water out of the lagering tunnels.
Be careful, you're only employee.
Sometimes when you're in the middle of a project like this, you get lost. You look around you, you look at the spaces, you look at the buildings, and you find yourself imagining that you're back in time. You can see what things looked like 100 years ago. That's sometimes. There's other days when things are a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, that was the previous thing that happened.
You're sure everybody's out?
Yeah.
triple checking everybody's faster. Jump on it. That sounded like a very big jump.
We have a sunroof.
Yes,
When I showed up and seen, well, my wife explained to me that there was a lot of work that needed to be done, and I had knowledge of it. I said, okay, she goes this and that, but then I got there and it's like, OMG, this is a death trap. I know the hard stuff and the tedious stuff, I guess you'd say. We had good volunteers and everything helping, so I mean that was very helpful. Company I work for, we do a lot of weird stuff like that. When we worked down at Spring Grove Cemetery, tearing out, paneling a boat off the wall for a water leak over 30 years. You know, I've did all kinds of little, but nothing as major as that was. I mean, that was a good undertaking, to put it.
At this point in the project, not only has reconstruction finally started, but cleanup is well underway. Dozens of volunteers are spending weekend after weekend literally walking down 6 flights of stairs into the basement of a lagering tunnel, shoveling bucketful after bucketful of muck, and then carrying it up by hand up those 6 flights of stairs to be taken outside to be removed. The amount of work that's involved in this whole process is kind of mind-blowing.
It was very, very scary at first. There was so much debris that has been stacked down there for years. Everything was rusted, and everything weighed about 1,000 pounds, it seemed like. There's just huge pieces of metal that they used either for the brewery back in the day, the winery, or the restaurant that was down there. So there was a lot of material that we had to move out. It was super unique to be able to, go there every Saturday, meet with new volunteers and new people who were just as excited, and show them the process of what we do by revitalizing these, parts. And I was even able to get some of my family and friends and fiance involved as well. And, it was going towards a good cause, and it was just a good time, get your hands dirty a little bit and live in history.
At this stage in the game, you might be wondering, as I'm sure some of the volunteers who are knee-deep in mud and God knows what else were also wondering, why? Why do folks do this?
My family rather has been a property investor, and we've restored historic buildings for 3 generations. Started doing this stuff when I was 12 years old on ladders and stuff with my grandpa and my dad. And one of the things we always talked about was wanting to own one of the pieces of historic Cincinnati brewing architecture, and we weren't really quite sure what that was. About 6 years ago, we got an opportunity to take a look at the Bruckmann building. For us, that's the very first one you see when you drive into the complex, which was the bottling facility originally. At the time, a glass-making company owned it, and the guy, just bought a building just to have a place to stick his business, basically. He was there for like 50 years, whatever, and walked through the property, and he wasn't even 100% sure, but he said something to the effect that there were some old cellars or caverns underneath the building, and I tried really hard not to get excited, because I knew what they were. Most people at the time, didn't really know. And we picked it up as our center of operations, and had the opportunity to fix the building up, clean it up, and was really impressed by how much of the building itself is still there historically from the mid-1800s.
The Bruckmann Brewery site is really an incredible piece of history. It's one of the most complete brewing complexes it is the most complete brewing complex that we have in the city of Cincinnati. Even the original house that's in the middle of the brewery complex for the family is still there, standing. And the fact that it has stayed there and switched from different companies and companies through all these generations, with the highway being built right next to it, and everything that has been industrialized on the other side of the highway with the train tracks, that this facility has remained in its place, intact almost completely.
So Cincinnati during the 19th century was a boom town. We've got massive waves of immigration coming in here, especially in the 1830s, 40s, and 50s. Many of them are hailing from the Germanic states, and a lot of them end up settling in what becomes the over-the-Rhine neighborhood, just to the north of the newly christened Miami-Erie Canal. Lots of industrial activities spring up from there because it's a great way to bring in raw materials and make finished products in the neighborhood. And one of those, of course, is brewing beer. Now, many breweries spring up along there, and underground lagering cellars and lots of other elements of brewing, but the Bruckmann family did things a little different. They used the canal as well, but they were further outside the city, more in like kind of like the 19th century suburbs kind of. They move several miles north of Cincinnati's over the Rhine, also along the canal. It's actually adjacent to this property where they buy several acres in 1847. They don't actually start brewing here initially. It's a family farm site. But the Bruckmann family eventually gets into brewing, it seems like in 1856, where they're brewing beer in their family home. And according to family lore, the Bruckmann matriarch, Friederike, she was selling beer to passersby on the canal, and word gets out about the quality of it. And by 1861, they decide to open up a full-fledged brewing operation here on the site.
It's amazing that through all the following years, the complex managed to survive. It's a miracle, actually. How does this space dodge the fate that everywhere else couldn't?
So it sits right in between I-75 on the one side and north side beyond that. And then on the other side, there's Cincinnati State, or what used to be CTC. My dad used to teach there, actually. And then, of course, in between that and the entire Bruckmann complex is Central Parkway, or the canal, of course. You look at that, well, they're not going to build anything on top of the canal, and then they're not going to build anything on top of that because the subway's under it. It just so happened that Bruckmann is sitting in between all of these different things that just so happen to occur. So it's an opportunity for preservation. The other component to it is that people used the buildings. So, you know, the glass-making guys, they didn't really care so much that it was a brewery at one point. They needed it, you know, they maintained it kind of to take care of it, and because they want to run their business out of it. And there was a lot of other, Atlantic Packing, they've been there for almost 60 years. They maintained it, they put roofs on it, they did what they needed to do because they needed to run their business. So the other component to not necessarily being right where it was to get torn down is that people were using it. They were using all the buildings. They had, I mean, Worthmore Soup was there for a really long time, and they actively had people working, living, doing what they needed to do in the buildings. So if you have people using these historic buildings, it's not enough to just save them. You need to get people involved and living and working day to day in these type of buildings. That's what keeps them around. That's what gives them life.
And in the years after Bruckmann was sold off and finally closed, after all the brewing on the site stopped, there's always been plenty of life. From chili companies to wineries, the complex was kept alive by folks who were just working. To ensure this space is preserved, though, that's where folks like the Brewing Heritage Trail really shine.
Preserving history is very important to our organization, and we do that in a variety of ways. Information that we gather through research and also through our activities in and around Cincinnati are very important to us to share with the public. So this is a location that's very unique in the United States, where we have the largest collection of pre-prohibition brewing structures in the country, both above ground and below. These underground lagering cellars that are around here are very unique in the sense that they still exist today, whereas in many other brewing communities they were demolished. There's lots of great examples of these structures that have been preserved in a variety of ways around Cincinnati, especially in the Over the Rhine neighborhood, where we've got the historic Jackson Brewery complex located up on a hillside with cellars excavated into the hill for lagering purposes. We've got a massive Christian Moorline complex, which used to be the 4th largest brewery in the country, based in Cincinnati, and many of their structures remain. The modern Rheingeist Brewery is located in their former bottling facilities, and Rheingeist is a great producer of beer today, and also is a great example of sort of hidden history in plain sight. They've they've recently discovered a mosaic mural that was on one of their buildings, covered in paint for many years, and they've recently uncovered it for the public to enjoy again. And we find a lot of this in Cincinnati, and especially in the Over the Rhine neighborhood. We've got other projects that we've worked on in the past, such as the former Schmidt Brothers and Crown Brewery on the east side of Over the Rhine. This is a location that we helped excavate trash out of the cellars back in 2010, reopening up to the public. That's a pretty neat site where there's actually a tunnel that goes underneath McMicken Avenue, connecting multiple buildings on the site, which is pretty common for these 19th century brewing structures. And then we've also got the historic Sohn Brewing Complex, which is now occupied by the modern Cincinnati Beverage Company, and they're doing active brewing in there today, where they're brewing products like Hudipol, Little Kings, things like that, and restoring that structure for future generations to enjoy.
With water under control, attention can be turned to the stairs, which were in a little worse shape than I think anyone realized. Before these stairs are ready to carry tours down them, they've got to be taken apart. Damage has to be assessed. Pieces that are too far gone need to be replaced. Pieces that are rusty have to be cleaned, piece by piece.
Do you want to make it look as original as possible, but you do have to, you want it to be safe. When I do projects, a lot of times, older ones like that, I will get involved. I will go to the point of trying to make them look as natural as possible.
This is some of the fascination that I have with a project like this. On one hand, you're trying to take a historical space and honor and showcase that history for people today. On the other hand, you're trying to restore it. You're trying to make it safe and easy to navigate. And you're trying to keep Mother Nature out of it using modern techniques. And believe me, Mother Nature does not want to stay out of it.
So work on this project managed to get a lot of the trash and the 3 to 4 feet of water that was in here, and we got to work on the stairs and rebuilding a roof and that type of thing. But water is a natural feature on this site. The Bruckmann family selected this location because there's a natural spring on the site, so they could have water and eventually water for brewing. And that spring is still active and leaching into these cellars, which is why they're full of water. That's something that we've been trying to keep out, and we've had varying levels of success of that. During the winter time, the temperatures drop well below zero, and even though we had our sump lines rerouted inside, they still froze, causing the cellars to fill back up with water and freeze solid. Once the cellars were frozen, we decided that, hey, we had already had somebody come down here and kayak. Why not also double up on that and get someone down here to ice skate around the cellars?
If you only had a hockey stick.
Thought about taking some shots. Getting one for my buddy because these are his hockey. Actually going better than I thought it would.
Of course, the weather eventually warms up, the ice in the cellars eventually thaws, and the team, using a clever system of pumps, drainage pipes, and problem solving, gets the control over the water. Bruckmann is ready for tours. A tour of the Bruckmann complex can be described as nothing less than a step back in time. On the site is still the original farmhouse where the brewing all started for the Bruckmanns. You can see the original bottling building, the original stables. You can see the original brew house that became an ice house. You can see the huge malt house still on the site. There's even pieces post-prohibition, like a new power plant and a new bottling building. Sure, in the past, at some points in Bruckmann's history, the preservation that we see today was not always intentional. It just happened. But now Bruckmann is a story of preservation. It's a story of understanding who we were to find out who we're going to be and who we are today. That's what Bruckmann is all about. The Brewing Heritage Trail isn't an organization saving old buildings and taking us on tours. The Brewing Heritage Trail is an organization that's helping us understand who we are.
I'm the fourth. My dad was the third, and my son's the fifth. So I'm, I guess, the great-great-grandson of Johann Caspar Bruckmann.
my grandfather, William Bruckmann, who was the last president of the Bruckmann Brewing Company, he had 3 boys. And the first one was William, which, after him, and then my father, John C. Bruckmann III, and then my uncle, James Purcell. Well, his son, William, died from a car accident when he was 17. So my father became the top son or whatever. Now, when he got married to my mother, his first responsibility was to name his first son William. And then I had my 2 sisters, Lynn and Martha. And then I guess they kept trying until they got me, and then because they had to carry the name on. So it's always been instilled with me. I was the 4th, and then it was imperative that my first son was supposed to be John C. the 5th, and I did.
It's easy to lose sight of the past. Spending time in spaces like the Bruckmann complex ties us to that past. It reminds us that every time you sit down at your favorite craft brewery, you drink an IPA or a pastry stout or some other modern craft beer, you're tied directly to the people that built this city. And it wouldn't be possible without people like the Brewing Heritage Trail saving these spaces, connecting us to these spaces. This isn't a story about some old brewery building that just happened to have water in its basement. This story is about the river of beer that connects us to the people that came before us, and it's about the people who spend their time keeping that river flowing.
If you'd like to support the Brewing Heritage Trail, you can do so by becoming a volunteer with us. And we do have other activities besides shoveling muck in underground cellars. There's pouring beer and all kinds of other fun events that we do throughout the year. You can also help support our organization by taking a tour with us at places like the Bruckmann site. If you go to brewingheritagetrail.org, it's got all of our various activities and tours.